UFO sightings aren't a new occurrence in the quest for proving the existence of extraterrestrials. But then there's a difference between when a random person spots one of these flying objects and when an entire fleet of Navy pilots encounters them on a daily basis. Joe Rogan sits down with Lieutenant Ryan Graves as he narrates the slew of encounters he had with these flying objects on multiple occasions. So what did he see up there, and does this actually confirm the existence of these extraterrestrial objects on Earth? Well, stick with us as we take a look. Joe Rogan had an interactive session with Ryan Graves, a Navy pilot with over a decade's worth of experience, where he revealed the bizarre encounters he and his team had while flying through restricted airspace. According to Graves, his squadron was training off the East Coasts, and during the months-long training, the entire squadron had daily encounters with what the military now terms unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. Lieutenant Graves explained that his team was training in a sealed block of airspace back in 2014. His squadron, the VFA-11, otherwise known as the Red Rippers, were training off the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in preparation for a deployment mission to the Persian Gulf back. According to Graves, this block of airspace was a restricted area about 10 miles off the coast of Virginia, where nothing else but the squad was allowed to fly during those months. During the course of training, the team reported multiple encounters mid-flight with what they could only identify as UAPs. Graves revealed that the very first encounter began after they'd received a much-needed upgrade to their radar systems, as they were able to detect other flying objects with better precision and detail. But it appeared the radar system was then able to pick up something other than commercial planes and fighter jets. Practically speaking, it's like going from an analog TV to an OLED. The classical radar had limited range and less ability to track multiple targets and things of that nature. So generally speaking, we would expect to see more objects or smaller objects, if there were any out there, but there shouldn't have been any object that far out. The pilots began picking up on unknown objects in the training area, an area that should have been free from any other mechanical flying object. At first, the team dismissed these objects as radar errors and possible glitches from the new upgrades. But then they started seeing the objects in their FLIR systems, which are infrared cameras on fighter jets that detect heat from other close-range flying objects. At this point, they couldn't dismiss these strange objects as radar glitches and agreed that there were indeed some weird flying objects in the training area. We were trying to figure out what the heck these things were. We were seeing them pretty much daily. We'd go out there and they'd be out there in the morning. They'd be out there in the evening. These things were pretty much always out there. They would range from 2 to 3 of them to 6 or 7. According to Graves, the radar and infrared sensors picked up on more than just the presence of these objects, but were also able to track their speed and velocity as well. These UAPs don't move in the way any commercial or military aircraft would, as they tend to move diagonally in the sense that they would have to have thrusters on multiple angles of the object to be able to manage this. The pilots also observed that these UAPs were able to stay perfectly still and motionless at times. This is significantly intriguing, as there were winds of up to 130 miles per hour at those elevations. And although most aircraft can maintain a certain pace of speed, there would still be considerable variation with respect to pushback from high winds. In essence, these UAPs had powerful control in terms of thrusters or flying gears, something no commercial or military aircraft today can do. Also, the radar system picked up on the speeds of these objects, and they were observed to be able to reach speeds of Mach 1, which is essentially the speed of sound. There are very few military jets that can reach these speeds, and they do so for a limited time frame as opposed to the lengthy durations at which these UAPs can maintain these speeds. On one particular occasion, these encounters went beyond simple observation to a near collision with an FA-18 fighter jet. The encounter happened on a sunny day in April of 2014, when 2 FA-18s were conducting a routine air combat training mission off the coast of West Virginia. Both jets had just taken off the aircraft carrier and were proceeding to climb to an altitude of 12,000 feet. This area of restricted airspace had a single entrance point located at a set altitude at a single GPS point, almost like an invisible doorway in the sky, leading into a massive area where the Navy pilots operate without fear of hitting strange objects or each other. Just at the moment the first jet crossed the entrance point into the area, the pilot spotted what he described as a dark grey cube hanging inside a clear translucent sphere, hanging motionless against the wind. The pilot flew right by the object, only missing it by 50 feet, and the second pilot flew right past as well, only a few seconds later. Both pilots had encountered something bizarre that they couldn't explain. They terminated the training exercise and immediately returned to base. Lieutenant Graves stated that the pilot was still shaken up at what he had seen and was still shocked that he almost hit this unidentified object. Graves described the pilot's deposition when he returned to base, stating, "He said I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't have a name for it yet. The pilot described the objects as having no visible means of lift or control, as would any normal airborne craft. They had no wings, engines, or even flags to control airspeed. The technology for both flight and speed that these objects exhibited was both seemingly impossible and intriguing to Lieutenant Graves, who has over a decade's worth of flight experience with some of the most advanced military aircraft in the world. Following the near-collision event, the pilots began training in different parts of the training area to avoid any possible collisions with these unidentified objects. A little over a year after the first confirmed sighting, the USS Theodore Roosevelt moved from Virginia to the coast of Florida, and the pilots were hoping the encounters would finally stop, but they didn't. The sightings of the UAPs continued even though the training ground had moved over 600 miles south of its original location, but that was when an FA-18 pilot caught something even more bizarre on film. By Lieutenant Graves' account, a pilot from his squadron was returning to the aircraft carrier after routine training and was about 5 miles off the coast when he captured one of the UAPs on film. This video, which was originally classified by the Navy, was later declassified following pressure from the public, and shows a bizarre gimbal or spinning top object flying at over 10,000 feet above sea level. In the video, the pilot can be heard stating his shock over what he's witnessing. "There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh, they're all going against the wind. The wind is 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude." What we see in the footage is a single object moving incredibly fast, but according to Graves, there were at least 4 or 5 other objects of similar disposition that showed up on the radar but were out of range for the camera. These other objects were operating similarly and appeared to be moving in the same direction as the gimbal. These videos are some of the best real-life footage of UFOs or UAPs, as the military prefers to call them. Since leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Graves has made it his mission to shed light on the reality of these objects, launching the Americans for Safe Aerospace Foundation. His non-profit is aimed at encouraging reports of these UAPs as they pose a real threat to aircraft that may unknowingly write them off as benign. He stated that, "I think a lot of the cultural baggage that had prevented the reporting has gone away, at least in the Navy. I've been getting reports from people that are still flying out there, that are still seeing these objects. Some of them were describing cubes and spheres. I've heard it described over the course of 8 or 9 years, basically the same object being reported." The truth is, as of right now, no one knows the true nature of these objects, as they could be extraterrestrial or foreign drones. But one thing's for sure, the uncertainty of their presence poses a real threat to national security. What do you think these objects are? Share your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.